Welcome, everybody, to the Morning Drugs Podcast. I am your host, Gavin, and today I'm joined by my part-time co-host, Shannon, the OCPD coach.
Yeah, come on. What's going on, everybody? Shout out to everybody listening across all the different podcast networks. It's been quite some time, but excited to be back.
We're definitely happy to be able to do this together today. I know it's been a few months since there's been a podcast. I'm not going to take the time to explain it because it's boring, but hopefully you'll be getting more regular episodes moving forwards. So we're both excited to be here today and to have a conversation broadly on mental health. But I wanted to start out the episode today with it's a potentially controversial statement, and that is that neurodiverse does not mean anything. I know we had a quick chat before we got on the recording. I kind of wanted to give you a heads up that I was going to say that because I don't know how everybody's going to feel. But I do want to obviously explain myself. So when I say neurodiverse doesn't mean anything, what I mean by that is that every single person on this planet is neurodiverse. None of us think the same. Everybody has got their own brain, their own set of genes, their own lineage. Everything that has happened to you, if you're listening up to this point, has made you a complete and total individual. They're wanting us to essentially replace, well, first there was Asperger's and autism, and then everything kind of switched over to autism spectrum disorder. And by using that, they were able to pull a lot more people into the fold. And now by using the term neurodiverse, they're pulling even more people into the fold. And by the fold, I mean people that require treatment. That could be therapy, that could be medications. And unfortunately, I think that we're over pathologizing large segments of the population. I think people are stressed. I think people are living in a time in history where we're bombarded with every bit of information of what's going on around the world all at once. I don't think that our brains are evolved to handle the types of stimulation that we have. Everybody feels a little funny, but I don't think that means that there's something wrong with you. I think that you're probably responding correctly to the stimuli. That's kind of the general idea for today's topic. And I don't know how you feel about this, Shannon, but like personally, I would consider myself to be a humanist. And to me, it's funny to call myself that because I generally don't like a lot of people very much. But where we fall in terms of what's important in the universe. But we're small, right? We're minuscule in the grand scheme of things. And I couldn't disagree with the statement more than the idea that we're small, we're insignificant, we're nothing. As far as we know, we're likely to be the only conscious beings in the entire universe. And in a universe as big as ours, I think that that's pretty special. I think that that kind of makes us the most important thing in the universe. I think it's worth protecting. And I hear this topic a lot lately because we're now in we're in a post-AI world essentially. And so people like to talk about the importance of AI, the future of AI, the future of humanity. And I couldn't think of anything worth protecting more than humans and the future of humans. I don't think that it's a protection to medicate the entire population. I don't think it's a protection to put the entire population into therapy. I think that there's a lot of other things that we should be looking at, and we'll talk about those today. But I am curious, being a religious person, how do you feel about where humans fall in the grand scheme of things?
I mean, you made your controversial take, and this is my controversial take. Me being religious, I think we're in the end of times, just biblically.
Mm,
So,
mm,
with that being said, I honestly do believe we are coming towards the end of humanity. We're
mm,
much closer to the end of humanity than I think a lot of us realize. I believe that with the dawn of technology in general, so computers, let's start with computers. I don't know too much about everything before computers, but as a millennial, I'm in that weird space where I come from a childhood where we didn't have computers. And
mm-hmm,
then during my childhood, at some point, we did get computers in the home. And one of the biggest things that I noticed is that we used to be much more about people, much more about family
mm-hmm,
before these computers entered the home. We used to have friends that were in person, and I remember in high school I started having people I knew, and I interacted more with people online than people in my own high school, just because I was able to find people who had the same interests that I had online with different forums and different things like that. And even to this point of this Thanksgiving that just passed, which was
Hmm.
about a week ago, this
Yeah.
is the first Thanksgiving where my phone was shut off the entire day. So I didn't talk to a single person on Thanksgiving except for my wife and my son. And it felt
Yeah.
so weird to me because I come from a really, really strong family. I don't even know how you would want to put it, but we used to have
Like a close family.
close, big family.
Okay.
So we used to have multiple. I used to have multiple family get-togethers on Thanksgiving where we would talk to over 40 people at each house. So I'm talking to probably at least 70 people every single
Hmm.
holiday
Hmm.
to talking to none. And it was
That
eerie,
is.
but it also felt natural. It felt mutual. So
Hmm.
I do think, when I don't remember the exact Bible verse, but I believe it was in I think it was in First Timothy, but I don't remember. That was
Hmm.
one of the signs. It did talk about the distance
Mm.
between family and
Hmm.
people becoming lovers of self over actually wanting to interact with other people or having that same respect for other people. So I don't know. We're gonna get into a deep conversation. So this is really
No,
interesting.
yeah, and I do want to get into a deep conversation, and I'll start by asking, what is your idea? Because I grew up religious. We've talked about that in the past. What is your idea of the end of times? Is this the end of the earth? Is this the end of humans? Is this Are you talking about like robots taking over, or what is your impression or idea of what the end of times is based on your own personal beliefs?
From my personal beliefs, and you can go deeper with research, and I could probably alter that in the future. But right now, I believe that we're going to enter this era of the Great Deception, and I think AI is the dawn of that Great Deception because
Mm,
we're going to. Honestly, it's already happening. People are not able to tell what's real or fake with a lot of stuff. AI is so convincing now that we're already
100%.
being deceived. And when you start to get to the point, have you ever watched that movie Ex Machina?
Yes, yes.
I always think of that movie, how the goal of the main character of the guy who owned the company was to see if I tell you this is AI, will you at any point forget that this is not a human? And
Right.
you start to see feelings develop for a robot. So for me, I
Hmm.
think we're already in the Great Deception. But when I think into times, I think a lot of people the faith. So you basically have to make that decision.
Hmm.
Do you have faith? Do you believe in God, or do you not? And are you gonna just be consumed with the world? And we're at that point where you're going to have to, based off whatever decision you make, you're either here on the world as the world's being destroyed, or when God comes back, when Jesus comes back, you get taken to wherever he actually is going to take you, and the earth gets restarted, or whatever that whole thing.
Hmm.
That's where I always get gray because I don't know how that
Sure.
actually looks, right?
Right.
But one more thing is when we talk about the becoming one with technology is where I think that's the part that people are not seeing yet. But I think we're
Hmm.
we're inching closer to where they're going to start really trying to put the microchips inside of us, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see it coming more and more, man. We don't even want to put our phones down. The economy, the way everything is, I see it coming, and you're going to have to make that choice. Do I want to allow this chip to go inside of me, and this is how I have to get food, and this is how I have to use currency, my DNA, biometrics, all that good stuff? Or
Yeah.
am I willing to basically just starve until I die? And I don't know, man.
Hmm.
It's a crazy
Hmm.
decision you'll have to make.
Yeah. And when I talk about being a humanist and wanting to preserve humanity, essentially, I'm not in a position to do that, and it's frustrating. I don't have that type of money. I don't have that type of power. To be honest, I don't have that specific intellect. I'm not the one developing AI. I'm not the one. I don't work in robotics. I don't work in rockets. It does leave you feeling very helpless. This is part of what I was saying at the beginning, where we're not evolved to deal with the types of things that we're kind of forced now to deal with. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept or if you've heard I think it's from a science fiction author, and I think it's from a famous one. So I'm going to get in trouble if for not knowing this. But this is not my statement, but it's something I'm scared of, which is the idea that humans are the sex organs of the machines. And the idea behind that being that it was always going to be, from the dawn of man, it was always going to be inevitable that we eventually build machines that surpass us and leave us in the dust. And whether that means we're the slaves of the machines or whether that means we're completely eradicated, I don't see anybody in that space that's concerned enough about that idea. Technology absolutely has look at the technology behind nuclear weapons. Like, we've built the technology that can destroy humanity. It's already exists. So the idea that we couldn't build another technology that would be just as capable of wiping us out, that's clearly something that people should be concerned about. I think it would be good to understand, the technology. You said coming up, being in that weird space, when I was in my early school years, there was no computers. And it wasn't until high school where they started introducing early Macs into my high school. I joke all the time that if I could, build a time machine and go back to the 90s and warn everybody, like, this is right. We don't need social media. It doesn't bring people together. It splits us all up. And AI is likely to be the death of humanity. I still retain hope, but the hope, kind of dwindles by the day when I look around and see what's happening, if that makes sense.
No, I agree, and I'm one of the more optimistic people just in general in life. I would say I don't know, maybe
Mhm.
people disagree, but one of the things that I always think about is that I mean we're all going to go one day, all of us individually, and I don't even know if Earth itself would be in the current condition with how humans are, if the Earth would even be able to sustain human life
Mhm.
for that much longer. I don't know.
Right.
So it's part of it. What I will say is this though. A lot of I've been watching a lot of the videos recently just talking about the jobs that AI
Yeah.
has been able to take, right? So I think there was an estimate from man, I wish I had the exact numbers, but I wish I had the exact numbers, but there was some study and they said that jobs are estimated to take over 99% of jobs or take the
Mhm.
unemployment to 99%.
Mhm.
And you have to wonder what if jobs are gone, how we're all going to be able to spend money to keep companies going. And you start to, I keep hearing this universal basic income thrown around, and
Mhm.
it's definitely seemed like it's a plan. It does none of this seems
Mhm.
accidental.
No, not at all.
We talk about AI. If we stopped in the United States, then they say, "Oh, China's not going to stop." So then it's just I don't know. Ultron was right. Ultron was right.
Yeah.
In Age of Ultron,
Yeah.
humans are the greatest threat to other humans. So maybe we do need a clean reset if that's the case. I'm kind of in that state of mind where I'm not against what's going to happen because it's nature. It's going to take its course.
Yeah, I definitely understand that point of view. I don't share it, but I definitely get it, and I understand why somebody would think that way. I think, being religious, I think there's an advantage to that as well, in terms of being okay with kind of whatever happens, because there's some sort of predetermined nature to existence. I do think it's funny. I was laughing to myself as we were talking. I'm like, oh, we've turned into the podcast where it's two bros talking about AI. I'm like, that's that's not exactly the direction. Funny enough, I'd made a bunch of notes about things that I wanted to talk about with you. They're all kind of on the same topic, or they're all related to each other. But I realized I wrote this just even the few months ago when I wrote these notes. Like, AI has come so much further in that I don't think in any of these notes I mention AI, even though it definitely relates to the topic as I wanted to talk about it. But to kind of like bring it back to what I started with, because otherwise, if I don't explain myself a little bit better, I know people are going to be saying, this guy doesn't think neurodiverse people are real. They don't exist. Couldn't be further from the truth. Clearly, we have autism. Autism is a diagnosable condition, And there's moderate versions to severe versions. Some people really suffer, and for those people that are suffering, I want them to have access to help. I want them to get the help. This is not that. This is the idea that just because you think different or just because you talk different, it doesn't mean that you have a diagnosable condition, and more importantly, it doesn't mean that you need treatment. And when I hear people say neurodiverse, what I think of is like a brand new computer, like an out of the box computer. And what does that computer consist of? What is a computer out of the box, right? Maybe it's 10% software that we need. Eventually, like that computer, after some time, it exposes it to like malware, right? So maybe some of the computer is comprised of malicious software, and relating that back to a human, right? That is physical abuse, mental abuse that maybe a person has undergone. And then the rest of the computer, the majority of the computer, is available storage. And thinking of it in terms of, a brand new human being, right? A baby is born and they come into the world, and 10% is the genes, right? It's you and I both have OCPD. We've talked about OCPD a lot in the past. So maybe we've got that switch in our brain, right? If we experience the right sort of trauma, that switch gets flipped, and now we have a diagnosable condition. So
Mhm.
we've got 10% is like what we're born with, and we've got 10%, which is the situation that we're born into. So that could be traumatic, or that could be super positive. We could have a really healthy upbringing. And let's say we had that OCPD switch, but nothing ever happens to us that triggers it. So then we don't go through our life with OCPD. But the majority of our brain, the overwhelming majority of our brain, is a sponge waiting to be filled up. And it's waiting to create that personality, that individual that makes us different from everybody else. We're all neurodiverse because we've all got completely different brains that are built off of completely unique experiences. And so for me, I think that we are more dissimilar than similar. In politics, there's a lot of talk about how people want to believe that we're more similar than dissimilar, because that's a very kumbaya thing to say. That's supposed to be uniting. But I think if you really want to unite people, you have to acknowledge how different we are. I think that's when we're able to come together, is when we can see the differences and we accept each other in spite of the differences, or because of the differences, if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense. And I told you before, I don't really. Okay, all right. So let me just take a step back. I have OCPD, I have ADHD, I have OCD, and I wouldn't be surprised if I had a touch of something else, especially with my sensory issues. But
Yeah.
one of the things that anytime I've spoken with individuals and I've just spoken with them about my disorders, I've always expressed that the titles are the titles, but I just like to focus on what the symptoms are. What am I
Mm-hmm.
actually dealing with? So I have noticed that every single person I've talked to about any mental health stuff or just in general, everybody has said that they had similar things, or at least one of
Mm-hmm.
the similar traits. So if we're going based off of that, then I actually think that your statement makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of us deal with things, and we go right to with therapy. I always recommend people to go to therapy at least one time, just to at least understand how your brain works, right? But I actually stopped going to therapy after 6 sessions, and started working on myself at home and seeing what I could do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What When I was going to therapy though, it was recommended that I get checked out for ADHD, and I never had gone before or thought about me having ADHD. And it was confirmed I had ADHD, but before that I had a misdiagnosis, and I was
Mm-hmm.
misdiagnosed with bipolar 2 and prescribed medication immediately. This is in the 30-minute meeting. So
Yes.
that instantly, for me, that really altered my trust when somebody was going to have me on medication that could alter my brain without any true verification that I suffer from that. So I'm always iffy about the medication and
Mm-hmm.
different things like that. So I actually do agree with this statement.
Well, that's great because that's exactly the topic that I wanted to dig into. At least, for the first half of the podcast, I wanted to talk about therapy and therapists a little bit more. But before, I don't want it to seem like I'm throwing therapy and therapists under the bus. And again, I'm not saying any of this to cover my ass. I'm saying this because I fully believe it. I think therapy is a fantastic and critical component of treating mental health issues. I think that there are lots of good therapists out there that have your best interests in mind. I think for some people, medication is the right direction or it's the right path for them. And even though I do believe that people are being wildly overdiagnosed with different disorders, it's clear as day to me that there is a big uptick in mental health issues. So I'm not saying that we've got the same percentage of people as we've always had that are suffering from mental health issues and people are being overdiagnosed. I am saying that the ramp up in mental health issues is absolutely real, but the ramp up in diagnosis is a much steeper curve. And I like to save social media posts when I think they pertain to something that we might talk about on a podcast. And it's become very common for people to make posts about dating and saying that they believe it's a red flag if somebody is not in therapy. Have you heard that before?
Y'all heard these stupid red flags, man. A lot of it. I'm kind of old fashioned. I think a lot of people just say stuff for attention,
Well, that's true. There's no doubt
and
about that.
I know it sounds good to say that, but everybody doesn't have to be in therapy. I mean, people don't. Everybody doesn't feel that
No.
they always need to be in therapy. Sometimes they have a good grip of who they are or what what they need, but for somebody to say it's a red flag is just somebody
Right.
trying to
No,
find
it's a ridiculous statement. If you look at the results of therapy, over a population of people over time, the results are not as good as you would want them to be. And I also wanted to say, because again, I'm not trying to cover myself here, but I am in therapy. I've been in therapy a long time. Some might say that that's part of the problem. Like, it shouldn't be something that is ongoing for half your life. And I do agree with that statement to a point, but I do have a fantastic therapist. I do believe in therapists. I do believe in therapy, but I don't want to ignore, we'll call them red flags, but I don't want to ignore the issues that I see. And so I think every therapist that I've ever had, and I've had some bad ones over the years, every therapist I've ever had has been in therapy themselves. And the people that I see posting online that either have a degree or are pursuing a degree in the hopes of becoming a therapist, a lot of them seem unstable. I don't want to be insulting, so I won't
No, I get you.
label them as anything else. But I would say unstable is a pretty fair statement. A lot of people think, okay, well, I've got a rough go of things and I'm not doing so well, but I'd love to help other people. I don't think that's the way it's supposed to work. And I don't love the idea. I do get that for some therapists, they're in therapy because they are processing, they're having to talk to people about the deepest, darkest secrets, and they probably hear some shocking things. So I get why you would need therapy as a therapist, but I do think a lot of them are that the therapy that they're in predates all of that. And so I just think that's interesting. I don't know if I have a particular take on it other than it's very fascinating that the people that are drawn to be, pursuing that career path, a lot of them are they're not completely balanced out people.
You When you brought this up, I kind of chuckled because my wife actually just told me about two separate cases over the past 2 weeks where the individuals have had specializations in the mental health field. I think some, at least one was a therapist, and the thing that they were actually helping people with, one of them was anger management, and then
Mm-hmm.
they were literally in jail or going to prison on trial for losing their anger.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So I just think a lot of times we forget that these are individuals with professions and
Mm-hmm.
that being a therapist is their profession. That is their job. I
Right. They
want,
clock out just like the rest of us.
yeah, they clock out, they get burnt out, they get tired. So it's just something they have to do to get paid. Some of them. Now you do have individuals who are really passionate about their careers and passionate about their jobs, but when you don't have that understanding and you start to think that a lot of maybe your therapist is the answer to your solution, then I think we start putting too much trust
Mhm.
in another individual to solve your problems when you have to really do all of the research and work on your end. And you can you can really probably speak to your experience and how much you've been able to get help with your situations. But I know when I was in therapy, a lot of it was just self-reflection. It was mostly self-reflection and a few nuggets of knowledge. But she couldn't fix anything with me. That's I had to
Right.
go home and actually do all of the work on myself, and I'm still doing the work to this day. I'm still struggling with different things, so I just don't want
Yeah.
people putting that false hope in people.
Yeah, for me, the goal of the podcast is to talk to people about mental health that may feel a little bit differently than the status quo. And so my view is that a lot of therapy is presuppositioned on hunches and guesswork. Now, there's a lot of research being done, and that research is incredibly valuable. Somebody comes along and says, "You know what? I think maybe if we talk to people in this way and we have them write down in a journal, I think that might help them with their mental health." They don't know for sure. That's just guesswork. That's all that is. I can guess, you can guess, we can all do the same thing. And it can take decades to find out whether a treatment is effective or ineffective, or what part of the population is it effective for, or what particular disorders is it effective for. We're still really in my estimation, like, and that's why I hope the robots don't kill us, because we need a lot more time here to figure this mess out, right? I think, and you mentioned too about it being a job. The therapy industry is predicated on making money.
Yeah,
You don't make money if somebody graduates from therapy, right?
that's true.
And
No, that's
yeah,
true.
and so the motivation isn't there to get people out of therapy. I think that therapy's end. It's just like, right, if you have a kid, your job as a parent isn't to um, protect the kid from every danger in the world. It isn't, you're not protecting them from hurt. You're not protecting them from hurt feelings. Your job is to try and raise a stable human, a human that can endure the hardships of life, a human that can be kind. The end goal is that this human is eventually going to leave the house or leave the home, and they're going to have to live in society amongst other humans and be a fully functioning adult. And so that should be the end goal with therapy. The end goal for therapy should always be to get them out of therapy. And for some therapists, that's how they run their practice. They're like, there'll be a new patient eventually, but this person's ready to leave the nest. Let's get them out of the nest. But the fact that the whole industry is predicated on making money, and I understand that it kind of has to be, but that is a flaw in the system.
Yeah, I agree. Let me ask you a question. Do you think if more individuals went to therapy, do you think that it would be less of a priority on getting everybody to stay in therapy? That makes sense.
I would have thought that, but my experience, with some of the other work that I do, my experience has been that there's always a line of people waiting to come into therapy. I'm not explaining myself well, but essentially, for every person that leaves the office, there's two more waiting for that person's hour. So I don't think there's a shortage of patients, but is it easier to take on a new patient, or is it easier to keep a patient strung along for years and years and years? That I don't know. I only know anecdotally my experience with therapists and what I've learned from talking to them and what I've learned from being a client of a therapist. Again, I look at the data that's out there. I look at my own personal experiences, and what I see is people staying in therapy too long. I think it's particularly an issue with younger therapists. I see, and these are the therapists that you might see on Instagram, or the therapists that you would. I don't know why I said Instagram. That ages me immediately. I should have said TikTok, but they but they love to pathologize literally everything, and I can talk from my own experience, because there's no point in doing this podcast if we're not talking about our own experiences. But I think that obsessing over your own mental health is self-defeating. There has to be a balance, right? If you have ADHD and you have OCD and you have OCPD, then you need to do things to improve your mental health. And
Yes.
that might be, you've shared with me, and we can talk about them today if we get into them, but you've shared with me your own tactics and how you've worked through some of the issues that you have. And for other people, like we've said, medication. For some people it's therapy, for some people it's meditation, for some people it's exercise. We need to listen to our inner dialogue, and if it's suffering, we need to do something about it. But I've been guilty of spending too much time thinking about my own mental health, and it's cyclical, and you end up in this loop where you're always worried about your own mental health, and no matter what you do to try and fix it, it's never enough, because your anxiety levels are through the roof, because you just spend all your time worrying about, what do other people think of me, how did I handle this situation, or you're perpetually depressed and you can't leave your home. And so I'm very concerned about people being diagnosed, because I think it can be a slippery slope, and it can put you on this path to spending too much time thinking about your mental health, or even working on it. You can do too much. I've been guilty of doing too much. I'll try to incorporate like a brand new exercise routine, and then I'll try and do a half hour of meditation a day, and then I'll do a bunch of reading on the topic. And all of a sudden I'm like, well, I don't have any time now to do actual fun, enjoyable things that might actually improve my mental health as well, like spending time with family, spending time with friends, participating in an activity, spending time on a hobby. And I think that the more we tell people that there's something wrong with them, the higher the odds are that they could get stuck in this same loop. And I'm curious, is that something that you've experienced at any point, where you felt like you've spent too much time focused on your own mental health?
Okay, so I will say when you said this, yeah, I had a different out. I had a little bit of a different look at it though. Um, for me, it seems like I was trying to spend too much time getting comfortable, and that's
Hmm.
how for me it was getting comfortable with my symptoms or trying to fix everything. And it was when I was taking Adderall for the past few years. I've been taking Adderall for my ADHD, and it's helped me tremendously. But I stopped taking it, just cold turkey. I stopped taking it a couple months back, and I went through about a month long. I guess you could say I don't like using the word depression with this stuff because I think there's
Hmm.
levels to it, but it was definitely something off with me. And I remember I
Hmm.
kept telling my wife, all I wanted to do was sleep. I didn't want to work. I didn't
Yeah.
have any motivation to do anything at all. I didn't want to talk to anybody. Wanted to keep my phone off the entire time. My son, I wasn't as active with him or my wife, but I was actually clinging to them more. I just wasn't able to give them the energy that they needed. And I remember I had to. I realized I looked up the symptoms of when you stop Adderall cold turkey like that, and I was dealing with those symptoms. I feel dumb, like I actually said those words. Said I feel stupid. I'm at work,
Hmm.
and it's like I'm behind everybody. I can't keep up. And I looked it up, and those were the symptoms of Adderall withdrawal. So I had no idea that that was even a thing, but it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, man, yeah, it was tough. I remember I talked to my old director about it because, he was on Adderall. He was one of the individuals that helped me through it, but I really thought I jacked my brain up. said I
I
jacked
can
my brain
imagine.
up.
Yeah.
It was scary. So I started taking this ginkgo biloba. I took
Ginkgo
it one
biloba.
time.
Yeah.
Yep. I took it one time. I actually had to take one today, but I took it one time, and it just changed everything for me again. Where I felt fresh. I told my wife, I said, I'm back, but I'm in a better state than when I took my Adderall because I'm not jittery. I'm
Hmm.
eating. My appetite's there. My heart rate isn't going crazy because my heart was really scaring me. So all of that to say, I think I was trying to do too much work when I was on the
Mm.
Adderall. I was
Okay.
pushing myself way too hard.
So
And
yeah,
then
that's just like the complete other direction then.
yeah. And then I finally just said, you know what? I need to just be comfortable being uncomfortable in this situation. So if I feel as if I think I'm being lazy or I don't have the energy to do something, it's okay. If
Yeah.
I'm in debt and I say I want to take it, do something for my family, then right now that's okay because I've been, trying to keep everything perfect my whole life, trying to
Hmm.
be comfortable. So I'm finally at the part of my life where it is what it is. Maybe it's because
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean,
turned
that's
30.
an incredibly healthy attitude, and that's I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about. That's where I want people to get to. As a quick aside, I'm going to make a note about the ginkgo biloba. The reason I knew the name of that is when I was in my early 20s, I managed GNC, the vitamin store.
Oh yeah.
So I managed one of those. So I was, and it was a location that got like no foot traffic. So all day long, I'm just like reading the labels on all these bottles and trying to figure out which ones I want to take and which ones I don't. But I forgot until you mentioned that. I'd completely forgotten about that, and I think I'm going to go out and buy some now and give it a shot.
Man, it's worked wonders. And what I liked about it, I don't have to take it every day. My Adderall, I had to take it twice a day because it wore off and you would
Hmm.
crash. This, I've gone a week and a half without taking it. And I just took it today so I could be more social in our
Hmm.
conversation. But
Yeah,
outside of that, I really haven't had to take it and I've been able to still get stuff done and just be around. So I'm feeling more natural, a lot more natural.
yeah. I love that as well because part of what the intention of the podcast is to talk about as many alternative treatments as well that are out there, and so that's not one that I probably would have thought to have brought up at any point. So I think that's great for anybody listening to don't take our word for it, look into it for yourself. But if you'd never consider it, or if you've never even heard of it, check out ginkgo biloba and see if that might be something that, depending on what you're suffering with, that might be a natural remedy that could help you out. And it sounds like it's done a lot of good for you.
Yeah. And I wanted to just one more thing about the topic that you brought up when we talked about basically doing too much, right?
Hmm.
When I've noticed that I have seasons, and this is something I didn't really know about myself, but now I'm starting to see it. I have seasons where I go really hard, and then seasons where I really back off. So I've been a really strong advocate of Jira, and I was using it every day. And then when I got to the point where I got off the Adderall, I was burnt out. I stopped. Now, old me would have really beat myself up about that. I would have really, called myself a failure, this, that, whatever the case might be. But this time, I said it is what it is. I'll jump back in when I want to jump back in. But right now, I'm actually enjoying this vacation from it. I'm still able to make life work, but I understand that I have seasons, and that's something that I don't know if I would have gotten that from therapy if I would have kept going, because I would have kept thinking, hey, I need to keep trying to make all these improvements. I need to stay consistent with this forever. And
Yeah.
when you self manage it, you realize that hey, it's your life, and whatever you have the energy to do in that moment in time, do it. Even streaming. You remember I was live streaming
Hmm.
3 times a week.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
haven't live streamed in weeks, and for me, it's okay. I'm not going to beat
Yeah.
myself up for not live streaming. Like, come on, relax on yourself, man. That's what I had to tell
Yeah.
myself. Relax on yourself, Shannon.
It's funny too, because I said at the beginning, I'm not going to explain the pause on the podcast, but I mean, essentially it just comes down to mental health. I'm somebody that has specific disorders. I don't like the labels any more than you do. I'm much more focused on the solution than putting a name on the problem. That's not the important part of it. The important part is what can we do to help ourselves. But because I'm suffering with all these things, it can be very difficult to stick to something. I have a lot of anxiety around recording. I have a lot of perfectionistic tendencies that prevent me from putting things out that I've produced, and everything's got to be just right. And I've come a long way in my treatment and in the progress that I've made with the disorder and the traits that I have to deal with. But at the end of the day, if somebody with genuine mental health issues is putting out a podcast, don't expect a regular schedule. That's not likely to happen. And if you're able to do it regularly, maybe you're not as unwell as you think you are. But moving off of that a little bit, because I don't want to spend the whole time throwing therapists under the bus. I think therapy is critical. I think it's vital. I think it's important. I think that there are some fantastic therapists out there, but not all of them. Not all therapy is created equal. And therapy isn't a magic bullet. Look at yourself. You took matters into your own hands. You found what worked for you. So it isn't guaranteed. If you have something wrong with you and you go, even if you see a fantastic therapist, it might be that you need ginkgo biloba. It might be that you need protein shakes. I don't know. You've got to try out a bunch of different things to find the thing that's going to be right for you. The trouble with that, though, is that you can also burn through all of your energy by trying too many treatments at once. I've also been guilty of this, and as somebody that does suffer with major depression, energy it's something that I value. I try to hold on to it because I try to expend it in the most critical areas of my life. And so be gentle with yourself, be loving, with yourself, because you can't overdo it with this stuff. You've got to kind of pick and choose what you're going to try. If you've got a hunch, like I said, a lot of therapy is based on hunches. If you've got a hunch that something might work for you, try that first. See where it goes. Give it some time. These things take time to show any sort of progress. So let's say that you're going to start, for example, instead of rambling, if let's say you're going to start a meditation practice and you're going to meditate a few times a week, do that for a couple of months, maybe 3 or 4 months, before you decide that it is for you or it isn't for you. Or if you're trying to measure your progress, you're not going to see changes in a 2 week period of time. You've got to give yourself time to acclimate to whatever the treatment is that you're choosing to pursue. So the more things you do at once, the higher the percentage of burnout, and that you're going to wind up right back in the place that you started from. What I did want to do is kind of move off of therapy and therapists and move into the world of self-diagnosing. I think that this is the other side of this coin. Social media is the source of what I would say the source of most of this trend of self-diagnosing. I think it is very dangerous. I think it's very unhealthy. And I do feel that a lot of it is being done for the wrong reasons. I think that a lot of people are doing this because they feel that they need to be seen, or they need to be special, or they want to kind of finagle themselves into a specific community of people. I I understand the rationale. I understand that we live in a world now that celebrates the 15 minutes of fame. When I was younger, this idea of 15 minutes of fame, it wasn't necessarily a good thing. A lot of people would get their 15 minutes through infamy by doing something bad or doing something wrong. And in a post-social media world where we celebrate that 15 minutes of fame, if you don't have it, then you feel like you're missing out, right? It's I almost said FOMO for a second. I'm gonna and hold back, but that's what it is, right? So you basically see people online, they're showing their lives, they're showing only the good parts of their life, and to be frank, like most of the time it's not even real. The good parts of their lives are completely made up. We've all seen videos of people that faked being on private jets. We know that people faking their status in life, people faking incomes, people faking the things that they own, the groups that they like. There's nothing that isn't faked online. And so people see this, they want a taste of it, and so they need to get that any way they can. And what people have discovered is that it's really easy to get that attention by essentially faking a disorder. I don't think in every instance that's what's happening. I think some people have kind of gaslit themselves or brainwashed themselves into believing that there is something genuinely wrong with them, even though there really isn't, aside from this kind of narcissistic streak that they're chasing down to its logical conclusion. But I guess I'd like to get your thoughts on, do you see this as a trend, and do you see an issue with it, and do you think that this is something that needs to slow down?
I'm like a social media grandpa because I'm not on TikTok, Instagram. I'm not on any of the social media sites watching anything. What I typically would do, you might see me watch a couple YouTube compilations and I see
Mm,
different things like that, but it's typically different topics. However, I have experienced a few cases of people talking about their mental health, and I can't speak to the validity of it, but I do think there is a danger in providing misinformation about a certain disorder, which is why, me, when I obviously make content about OCPD and ADHD, but what I like to do is always make it self-central. So I talk about my experiences and try to make sure that that's very clear. I think when we start to throw around the labels and we start to throw around misinformation, we create stigmas, unnecessary
mm,
stigmas. And then when people might hear, let's say OCD, right? When I first heard about OCD, and probably a lot of other people, I've always associated that with cleanliness. So this is somebody
mm,
who needs
mhm,
everything to be tidy. But that's a misunderstanding. That's ignorance. on my behalf when I actually dealt with people who have severe OCD. A lot of it was more about checking. So consistently checking to make sure things are handled the
Hmm.
right way and properly stowed away and that they're safe. So I just think that misinformation leads to stigmas. And then it also, when you have people who really do suffer from these different disorders, they might not get the right attention that they need. Because if you go and you go to a job, see, I'm very upfront. I tell people, yeah, I deal with these disorders or these symptoms, so I don't care
Hmm.
who it is. I'll tell the president if I talk to him. Yeah, I actually have ADHD, so I might jump around in the conversation, but that's okay. That's just how I am. And when you, if you're somebody like that, where you want to be more vocal about your disorder, and people have these misconceptions, then that could really make you shut down and not want to share because you might think that people think otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah,
100%.
no, I hope social media, man, social media is for attention. I never believe what I see people put on social media most of the time, because I know that it's just to get views, get eyes. And I have that, I'm very, very skeptical about social media in general. I just have that opinion, and I already assume that people have that with me. Like I already know people
Right.
look at my content
Right.
and say, "Does he really have this?" But it's for whoever takes the content in. It's for them to make that decision.
Yeah, I'm particularly torn when it comes to social media in my own personal life because of the things that I do secularly. This podcast is not a secular pursuit. This is just something that I've wanted to do in order to talk to a specific audience. But I really loathe social media. The only app that I'm semi-active on would be Instagram, although I am on the other apps because of the work that I do, and like I'm kind of forced into that. I think most people that are entrepreneurial are kind of forced into being on social media, whether they want to or not. Plenty of people want to be on it, but it kind of doesn't matter if you want to or not, because you have to play the game if you want to achieve any kind of level of success. But anyway, the point being is I'm on Instagram, and I think it's funny because I can never talk to anybody about whatever I see on Instagram because I know all I'm looking at are 3-month-old TikToks. And so whatever I see, I keep it to myself because I know that whatever it was something that people were talking about 3 months ago or 4 months ago. But going back to the self-diagnosing, I can give a specific example of what I'm talking about. So I have somebody that I know that was a very well-adjusted human being. This person had what they needed in life. They were social when they wanted to be. They weren't social when they didn't want to be. They were very good with boundaries. They were a good communicator. All in all, just somebody having a successful version of life. And they got mixed up with a group of people. This person overlapped some shared interests. They were, I think some of it had to do with board games and some of it had to do with online gaming, but it was a particular community that I was familiar with. And my fear was that once involved in this community, that this person was going to start self-diagnosing, even though there was no signs. And I'm not a therapist, and it's not my position to diagnose or not diagnose somebody. I fully understand that, but we all know people that are healthy and have healthy minds, and we know people that are, you know, the other end of that spectrum. And so, for my estimation, this was a very healthy person. And within a couple of months of being in this group, they messaged their family that they were autistic. And
That's scary.
yeah, yeah. And so this is a little bit of what I'm talking about, right? This need to fit in, this need to be in this hierarchical friendship group required that if they were going to get any sort of attention within the group, that they were going to have to diagnose themselves with something. Autism spectrum disorder seems to be the flavor of the month. It seems to be the easy one for people to latch onto. But with all of this self-diagnosis, you're really opening yourself up to being easily manipulated and marketed to. And what I mean by that is that you're now fodder for the therapy industry. You're now somebody that's going to be an easy catch for a bad therapist because you already believe something's wrong with you, even though nobody's ever told you that there's anything wrong with you. Not that we can't have a hunch, But again, we're not talking about the people that have legitimate disorders. We're talking about the people that are diagnosing themselves because they want to be accepted into a community, or they want to be accepted into a specific friend group, or they really feel like they need attention. Now, I'm not putting the blame on this person that I know. I think that as a society, we're just failing people in general across the board when it comes to mental health. And the people that run these large social media companies, they're well aware of the damage that this stuff is doing. um, it takes, I feel like I mentioned this in another podcast, but it takes thousands and this depends on your beliefs, I guess. But if we're gonna imagine for a second that we're evolved creatures, or even if we're not evolved but that we've evolved over time, we know that it takes thousands of years to make these changes evolutionarily. And what I'm getting at is that our brains are not designed for, not to go back into the AI, but we're not designed for a post AI world. Our brains are not developed for a post social media world. And so I don't want to put the onus on the individual, because these things are traps, and they're traps that are designed by the wealthiest, most powerful, some of the smartest people on planet Earth have set these traps out for us. So it's not a wonder that every single one of us has fallen into these traps. And going back to our own personal social media usage, we're trying to pull ourselves. If you become aware of what it's doing to you, then you got to try and pull yourself out of it, and it's easy to slip back in. One of the things that I was doing for a while was, if I needed to post on social media, I would download the app, I would do the post, and then immediately delete the app off of my phone, because I
Yeah.
know if I leave it on there, I'll get. I'm just as likely to be a victim as anybody else out there. So I'm not putting all of the responsibility onto the individual that is trying to feel special or feel needed. We've built a world that now requires people to have these sorts of feelings. We came up as a species in small tribes. The ideal community group is anywhere from like 80 to 120 people. That's an ideal community. And guess what? If you're in a community and that's all you know for your whole life, it's these 100 people, you're going to have moments where you feel loved. You're going to have moments where you feel needed and required. And you're going to have moments where you feel special, because everybody gets their turn in a community that size. But now when you take most of the planet and you put everybody on the same app and everybody's vying for that attention, now you're going to start doing unhealthy things to get that attention. Sometimes it's engaging in dangerous practices, dangerous activities, but other times it's claiming to be disordered with things that you're not disordered with. And that's what I'm seeing a lot more of. The point of me talking about this openly right now is that I'm hoping that even if it's just one or two people, if you're sitting there and you're thinking about how you're doing mentally, and what is the end goal? Is the end goal that you want to get help and you want to get back to a more balanced life? Or is it, no, I want to live with this disorder, I don't want to get better because people are paying attention to me now? I actually recently saw, it was an old one, I remembered it from a few years ago, but a video where somebody had pretended to have Tourette's, and they made videos for years and had a huge community of people that were supporting them because they thought they had a challenging life living with Tourette's. This person didn't have Tourette's at all. Everything was completely fake. But that's the kind of society that we've built. I think it's very sad. I think it's very tragic. And all I can do and all we can do in our small part is to at least throw some light on it, bring it out into the open and talk about it. And hopefully other people will be talking about it as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, man, we talk about the people making the content, and then I think about the victims who are consuming the content, getting this misinformation, or honestly, I think people try to find content like that to find hope, to say, okay, is there somebody else dealing with a similar circumstance, and how are they getting through it? And I think when you do have the social media is flooded with all of these bad actors, it makes it hard. So no, I think also our algorithms are probably different, because my algorithm now, I when you mentioned deleting the app, what I actually do, I use something called Buffer, and this is not a plug, but I have my younger cousin. manage all of my social media. So I never have to go on Instagram. I never have to go on TikTok. And I just have videos coming out or content coming out or being posted. And it makes it so easy because with my ADHD, I will instantly start scrolling on random stuff. And I think my algorithm knows that.
Mm-hmm.
They give me videos of space and sharks and what's the little animal?
I love
It's like
sharks. Yeah.
it's like a little chipmunk thing, but it goes woohoo. What is it? I'm mad I can't. It's like the cutest little brown furry animal, man, and like
So
I watch videos.
somebody listening will know.
Yeah, it goes it literally goes woohoo, and it's just a little brown, almost like a little chipmunk or something, but a prairie dog. I think it's a prairie dog,
Ah,
maybe.
okay, okay,
But I like content like that, so
yeah.
it just the algorithm knows that, and then I just next thing I know, I'm sitting up scrolling for an hour just looking at animal content because that's my disconnect. But I do feel for
Mm,
people who are getting this content and really looking for help and getting misinformed or lost or just insulted, honestly. To me, social media is such a fake world, man. It's so fake. Nothing is real. People turn on the camera to cry.
hmm
Um, and
Yeah,
when I see somebody,
that's such a bizarre phenomenon. It's
yeah.
just
So
when I'm at my lowest point, I don't even know cameras exist. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
I'm not thinking about how do I share this grief with the world. I'm just like wondering, am I ever going to leave my apartment again?
Wow,
You know?
wow,
So
yeah.
yeah, I completely agree. I think that one thing I wrote down is to me this is just another form of tribalism with a heavy dose of narcissism. And so tribalism, we see this a lot with political parties, right? That people will go along with even if they don't fully agree, they'll go along with it because they've aligned their identity with a political side. And so tribalism is you get into this community and you see like to bring up the red flags again, right? But you see red flags, but you ignore them for the sake of being a non-wave making member of a tribe. And then you're not going to get this without a little bit, at least a little taste of narcissism. You have to crave that attention if you're going to start faking disorders, which isn't entirely what we're talking about. We are talking about people that have been have convinced themselves, but there are others, that will outright fake a disorder, and you're not doing that unless you're coming from a place of narcissism. But to kind of like head towards the finish line of this podcast, I think that, and we've mentioned this once or twice already, that you need to focus on the treatment, and not all treatments are created equal, and not all treatments are for you. Even if it's a good treatment, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So, but you need to be focused on the treatment and focus less on the problem. Another thing is that the thing that's going to help you is taking action. You can't, for the most part, you can't think your way out of the problem. I wasted literally almost a decade of my life thinking that I could outthink OCPD. I thought that if I devoted enough time to reading about the disorder and to meditating on the disorder, that I could somehow magically cure myself. That isn't the case. That there needs to be action to back up the words, and that you're unlikely to be able to think yourself through this. Not everything, if you're listening, not everything about you is maladaptive. We have a diagnosable OCPD because part of having this disorder is that you have maladaptive traits, essentially things that don't allow you to fit in with the general world, right? We don't fit in as well with society because society has certain rules. It's run a certain way, and our personalities tend to clash pretty heavily with that. But even for you and I that have OCPD, there's loads of dimensions to our personality that do just fine out in the real world. Despite having social anxiety, I'm still pretty good at dealing with people. I do have friends despite having social anxiety. I do go to social events. In fact, some people listening may be familiar with the Time Left app. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was an app I signed up for about a month ago. And essentially, you go to a dinner once a week with five strangers. Every week, it's a new set of strangers. So the total attendees of the dinner, it's six people, and so it's me and five other strangers. And despite having this anxiety disorder and not being on any medication for it, and it's not even the thing that I'm really targeting in therapy either, I'm able to take action and I know the things that are good for me, and so I have to just follow through on them. Mental health is a tricky topic, right? You bring it up in a group of people, and it could go one of a few ways, right? It could go that you've now made the whole situation awkward and nobody feels comfortable with the topic, or you know, everybody starts talking about their mental health issues, and it's a bonding experience. I mean, it can go a bunch of different ways, but in general, it's kind of frowned upon. And part of the idea behind this podcast is also to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health. But that doesn't mean that you should be going around telling complete strangers, you know, all of your labels and your diagnoses. Um, and and the reason I bring this up is, so I think one of the ways to deal with uh, generalized anxiety and social anxiety is to just take away its power by admitting it. And so, in a group of people, I don't come right out with it because sometimes I don't need to. But if I do feel like I can start to kind of fumble my words, stutter a lot, and you'll probably even hear it during the recording of this podcast. I get nervous, and I can't think of the words that I want to say. But I will tell people, I'll say, oh, by the way, if I sound a little shaky or whatever, I've got a bit of an anxiety issue. I'm working through it. It's part of the reason that I'm joining these dinners. That's one like little tip, is like, you don't need to go into it. You don't need to make everybody feel uncomfortable, but just by kind of like quickly mentioning it, I find that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. I'm not as concerned about how everybody else feels, but I know once I've said it out loud, the next time I stutter or I stumble or I fumble, I know that at least I've told people why that's happening, and I don't feel like I'm being quite as judged for it, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. That's exactly how I try to be on my side with just being open about the different disorders I have. Because I mean, it's gonna come out a lot of times. It's gonna come out, especially the
Yeah,
ADHD
eventually,
in
right?
me. I mean, you're going to see me jumping all around topic to topic, all that good stuff. So I just tell people, hey, I have ADHD, so I might be all over the place. I have OCPD, so I might be really fine tuned on the details, and I also might have a hard. I mean, I tell leadership. I tell anytime I've taken leadership, I say I do have something which I'm dealing with, but it is a little bit hard for me to delegate. I really do have a hard time with people not living up to certain standards. So um, being open and honest, man, it really just helps everybody. For me, is so far, it's helped everybody out in the room and makes people a lot more comfortable to all build the trust with you, but then also just hear you out and hear what you're saying.
It's not a cure all. It doesn't make the anxiety go away. But even if you're in a high stress situation and you can reduce that stress by 10%, I think it's worth doing. And that's what I've found it does for me. And I feel like I've been honest. I feel like I've been a little bit vulnerable, but I haven't taken the conversation in that direction. And I make sure that I kind of followed up with something topic, not, I don't bring up like a news story, but I mean, whatever the conversation's been about, I kind of bring it back to that. I just kind of throw that quick aside in there, like, by the way, if I sound like my voice is a little shaky, this is what's going on. It's not a big deal, but I feel a little bit better if I kind of say that out loud. And I think, just to kind of wrap up the point of today's conversation, is that idiosyncrasies do not equal poor mental health. And I don't even really know what it means to be healthy, not 100%. What I think is that you take a look at yourself, you take a look at your life, you take a look at your thought processes, you take a look at your emotional well-being, and you say, am I on the right track? There's things in life that I want to do. Maybe it's a career, maybe it's find a loving partner, maybe it's travel the world, whatever it is that you want to do. Am I on that right path? Are there things that are getting in the way? And are those things connected to my mental health? And if so, how do I feel about that? Not everybody needs help. Not everybody needs to see, wake up tomorrow morning and seek out a therapist. But if you do need it, there's also nothing wrong with that. It's completely okay to talk about your mental health. It's completely okay to seek out treatments. But just know, because you feel a little bit different than the people around you, maybe you just haven't found the right people, or maybe you're going through an awkward phase of life. That's a whole other topic as well, right? Like, we all go through awkward stages of life.
Yeah.
So be kind to yourself, like I said earlier, but know that the things that are odd about you are probably the things that make you cool and interesting. They're not the things that mean that you need to run to your therapist's office.
Try to connect with people as best as you can. I definitely think that me having my wife, me having my son, just different individuals when I was in the church has really it really helped me with just having that community. And I spent more time engaging and helping other people than sitting in my own situation, which you do want to reflect, but it didn't allow me to get stuck. It allowed me to keep moving and then also pay it forward and start helping other individuals in different areas. So that being said, I hope everybody, I don't know when this will be out, but I mean, we're at the end of our year. So I'm hoping everybody has a great new year and just enjoys life as it comes to them, even as you struggle.
That's a fantastic way to end things. As always, thank you so much, Shannon, for coming on the podcast. I love having you on these episodes. I think you have a great perspective. I think you have a lot of positivity that you bring to it. So thank you again for being on this. And I guess we'll see you all in the next episode.